Mehrts. Morts. Moreton Bay dog. The girl. Girly. Darling. The pup. Mehrts is our 3-year-old German Shepherd. She has red shepherd in her. That's why she's so ginger and so photogenic in the late afternoon. She is frisbee obsessed and loves a good bark.
For us, Mehrts is our number 3. She's with us constantly at home. She follows us around everywhere and even helps with painting every now and again. So despite the fact that we wouldn't want to be without her for 10 weeks, there are sacrifices, challenges and considerations we had to make before deciding to bring her with us.
There are plenty of places you can't go with a dog, and we knew that going into the trip. National parks are a big one. During the trip, we went to 3 national parks. Uluru, we used a dog sitter who works at the local resort. The Breakaways, we were allowed to take her as long as she stayed in the car. Babinda Boulders, we went one at a time so one of us could stay with Mehrts. Otherwise, we chose to go places where there was no restrictions on dogs. We've been fortunate enough to visit national parks in Queensland, Tasmania and New Zealand. And for this trip, simply chose Mehrts over nature. Sorry, nature.
Camping is one of the easiest ways of travelling when you have a dog. There are a lot of dog-friendly free camps and often there is no one around. As you come into more populated areas, free camps do become few and far between. However, many hip camps now allow dogs and we never had trouble finding a site that was dog friendly. For the most part, they request you have your dog on a lead at all times.
We stayed in 5 dog-friendly places on our trip. Firstly, an Airbnb in Cairns. There was not many options for dog-friendly stays in Cairns, so I messaged multiple hosts requesting an exemption. Secondly, we stayed in a dog-friendly motel in Alice Springs, and that place was great. This was right after Mehrts cracked her paw, so it was nice to let her heal for a couple of days. Thirdly, a motel in Earldunda so we could go visit Uluru. The campsites available around Uluru are packed, and Mehrts doesn't do so well with lots of triggers around. She will often bark, and we don't like to disturb other campers. It allowed us to get up early and drive to Uluru without any kind of packer. Fourth, a dog-friendly Airbnb in Adelaide. We stayed in Adelaide for my birthday, and to have a little break from camping. The Airbnb was lovely, and they had no problems with a larger dog. Sometimes it can be difficult finding an Airbnb, because some owners only allow small dogs. And finally, the motel in Roma. Roma and surrounds had been smashed with rain, and finding a campsite was proving quite difficult. Surprisingly, there were multiple options for dog-friendly motels there.
Often the restaurants we wanted to go to weren't pet friendly. Mehrts was allowed in some pubs and cafes, but only if they had an outdoor area. We would bring her mat, and the staff would bring her water, in the hopes that they would get to pet her. When it comes to tourist attractions, we would either go one at a time, or not at all.
Go. She had heaps of space in the car. We were able to give her the entire back seat. Early on in our preparation, we decided to give her this big space in order to keep her as comfortable as possible. We knew we'd be driving for long periods of time. She was able to stretch out completely, as well as stand up and turn around. She was fastened in by a dog seat belt attached to a harness. Occasionally, if the door was left open, we would find her sitting in there, especially while we were packing up to move on.
Mehrts sleeps on a folding dog bed between our stretchers in the tent. Each morning we'd wake up to a wet nose, a sniff, and a whinge of impatience. It was a sense of relief having her so close. We didn't have to worry about her because we could always roll over and see her. Mehrts was the deciding factor for getting the larger RV5 Plus as opposed to the RV3 or 4. It's a 5-man tent, but more suited for 2 people and a girl.
We'd let her off the lead occasionally. Usually when we play frisbee, she's completely focused on it. Still, for the safety of her and other dogs, we only let her off when we were completely alone. This was also her main form of exercise. She would get a game in the morning and a game in the afternoon after we'd find a camp. She would usually get a game on her lunch break out of the car too, if it was safe. The only other exception to being off the lead was when she was in the tent or the annex. She wore her collar 24/7 and is microchipped, so if anything were to happen, we were easily contacted. Her long lead had a carabiner at each end, so we attached it to whichever part of the car was least in the way, depending on the setup. Sometimes the nudge bar, sometimes the wheels, but usually the tow points. Initially we bought a 10-meter olive drab paracord, which we thought looked really cool, but the trigger hook broke straight away, and we were constantly tripping over the camouflage cord. In Townsville, Ollie drove away with it still attached to the car, and we had a very manic woman waving us down to let us know. In Cairns, we purchased a 15-meter fluoro orange paracord and attached the carabiners. This lasted the rest of the trip and worked as advertised. Lesson learned.
We always kept a stash of dog bags on hand that we collected on the road. Ideally we'd aim to get the green compostable bags. In Alice Springs, Sheldon had thrown a heap into a tree, so I got them down and they lasted us for weeks. When Mehrts did a poo, we'd pick it up with a bag, have a drop in a loader and put it in the rubbish, which we would then empty every 2 to 3 days. We could never smell it. In hindsight, it would have been beneficial to do some more toilet on command training. It would have made the first few nights a lot easier.
Except for the 20-minute walk we had to do with Mehrts, try and get her to go to the toilet.
If not more. She's so out of routine. We're just walking up and down, up and down, up and down, trying to get her to wee. Turns out she didn't need to wee until about 5 o'clock this morning, so she went 15 hours without a wee.
She spent a lot of time in her hammock even when not driving, but especially when we were packing up. She would sit in the car and wait patiently or fall asleep. We would make sure she always had somewhere shady to relax. But for the most part, she follows us around like a shadow.
We had every intention of storing her food in a dry bag. Ultimately, it was more convenient to keep it in the bag it came in. It sat in the middle footwell of the back seat, and we scooped it out each day using her food bowl. We had to be very careful about any poisonous baits. One property we booked on Hip Camp had laid 1080 recently but couldn't remember where it was. Luckily, they had another site we could go to instead. This can be a real concern when taking your dog away with you. You do have to be vigilant, but this was our only encounter with bait.
Mehrts did have a cracked paw at one stage, which we noticed when she started limping and panting quite heavily. We found it was a crack on the pad from being at a particularly rocky site.
So the girls just jumped out of the car She's been in there for about 45 minutes. She came out of the tent this morning, jumped in the car. She's been in there ever since. She's got a very sore little paw. We thought maybe it was bruised because it kind of fit all the symptoms of panting and licking at it and stuff, but I just had a quick look at it when she was in the car and I could see like a little crack in her paw. And the last campsite that we were at was really rocky.
Other than that, she had a routine vet checkup in Adelaide, which found her to be in great health.
We used Mad Paws and cans so we could go out for dinner. The host was excellent, but it's certainly something we couldn't rely on. We did cancel some plans in Adelaide because we couldn't find a host that could accommodate Mehrts at their house. We also used a dog sitter when visiting Uluru. There was absolutely no one on Mad Paws, but Alex found Shannon's details on a blog, which we will list in the description. I wouldn't rely on dog sitters being available, however, occasionally it's an option. So, what gear did we take?
Absolutely not. We are definitely obsessed with our dog, as a lot of owners are, and we would have missed her terribly if we left her behind.
We got to take her on the trip of a lifetime, and it was wicked to see how easily she adapted and how much she enjoyed the trip.
On one occasion, she snuck out of the tent.
She tried getting in on our fish and chips on multiple occasions.
She played frisbee in some of the best campsites in Australia.
Just sit down and relax. Yes, yes.
Mehrts is our little mate.
She does everything with us, so why not this?
Girl, come. Come on. Come here.
We won't use that footage.
Not that bad, no.